The global grocery market moves $5 trillion a year. Olive oil, Parmesan, honey, but vanilla, seafood, products in kitchens from Sao Paulo to Warsaw to Lagos, built on labels that describe things they don't contain. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which 11 products are lying to you and what you're actually paying for. Lawsuit outcomes, lab results, regulatory raids, not opinion, the paper trail. The bottle on your shelf says extra virgin. A University of California Davis study ran the chemistry and found something different: olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is the most counterfeited food commodity on Earth. That is not a claim. That is the conclusion of global food fraud databases tracking incidents from 2008 through 2013. The standard for extra virgin is specific: cold pressed from fresh olives, no heat, no chemical processing, free acidity below 0.8%. Those are not suggestions. They are the legal threshold. What a University of California Davis study found in 2010 was that more than 2/3 of the most common extra virgin olive oil brands tested in California, grocery stores failed that threshold. Not because of labeling errors, because the oil was either degraded, made from overripe or damaged olives that legally cannot carry the extra virgin classification, or outright adulterated, cut with sunflower oil, soybean oil, and in documented cases, hazelnut oil, which is a known allergen, sold to unknowing consumers as something else entirely. In April 2007, U.S. Marshals seized 10,000 cases of olive oil from storage facilities in New York and New Jersey. The street value was $700,000. The product inside was mostly soybean oil relabeled as Italian extra virgin. Forbes reported that roughly 80% of so-called Italian olive oil available in stores is not from Italy, not produced entirely from olives, and in multiple tested samples, not olive oil at all. The mechanism is simple. Olive oil commands a premium. Sunflower oil costs a fraction. The label connects the two. The consumer funds the gap. This brand was raided by U.S. federal agents in 2012. What the agents found inside the wheels is still being sold to you today. Parmesan. Genuine Parmigiano Reggiano is produced by approximately 330 certified dairies in a specific region of Italy, aged a minimum of 12 months, with a name pressed directly into the rind. What the U.S. Food and Drug Administration found in 2012 when they raided Castle Cheese Incorporated was that the company was cutting their Parmesan product with cellulose, wood pulp, and distributing it to major grocery chains across America. Bloomberg News then ran the math on what was actually in the containers. Walmart's Great Value 100% Parmesan, 7.8% cellulose, nearly double the industry suggested maximum of 4%. The label said 100%. The product contained wood. The FDA allows cellulose additions up to 4% as an anti-clumping agent. Companies are not required to list the percentage. That is not an oversight. That's a regulatory gap that the industry fills with filler and charges you premium for the difference. One seller of Italian cheeses told Bloomberg News that approximately 20% of U.S. Parmesan production is mislabeled. Estimates on illegal counterfeit sales of product passed off as genuine Italian Parmigiano Reggiano run to $2 billion annually. The next time you reach for pre-graded Parmesan, the question is not whether it contains wood pulp. The question is how much. If you subscribe and drop your country in the comments, you'll see the global pattern here. This is the International Food Policy Research Institute and Oceana's data, not a blog. Back to the list. The bear-shaped bottle has been lying to people on every continent for decades. The mechanism is cheaper than you think. Honey. Honey is the third most counterfeited food in the world, behind olive oil and milk, according to the European Anti-Fraud Office. The fraud is called honey laundering. Real honey, typically from China, is either adulterated with high fructose corn syrup, beet sugar, or rice syrup before export, or routed through third countries to disguise its origin and avoid import restrictions. A 2015 European Commission study tested more than 2,000 honey samples and found nearly 32% were fraudulent or suspect. The FDA has suspended Chinese honey imports multiple times due to confirmed adulteration and the presence of undeclared agricultural chemicals and antibiotics, substances that should not be in a jar sitting in a kitchen in Berlin or Buenos Aires. A 2018 global study tested 100 honey samples and found 27% were either adulterated or mislabeled, with added corn syrup, beet sugar, and cane syrup as the most common substitutions. The word pure on a honey label has no federal legal requirement in most countries. In the United States, only one state, Florida, has laws that give that word any enforceable meaning. Every other jurisdiction, the bear can say whatever it wants. You ordered snapper. A DNA laboratory confirmed what was actually on your plate. The same thing is happening in grocery stores on 6 continents. Seafood. Oceana, the International Marine Conservation Organization, conducted one of the largest seafood fraud investigations ever performed, DNA testing 1,215 fish samples from from 674 retail outlets in 21 U.S. states between 2010 and 2012. 1/3 of all samples were mislabeled according to FDA guidelines. Of 120 red snapper samples collected nationwide, 7 were actually red snapper. The other 113 were a different fish. Tuna had a 59% mislabeling rate. White tuna ordered at restaurants. 84% of samples were actually escolar, a species nicknamed the X-lax fish because it produces a waxy ester that the human body cannot digest, causing severe gastrointestinal consequences in some people who consume more than a few ounces. You were not warned about the substitution. You were charged for tuna. A 2024 meta-analysis published in Science Direct compiled 35 studies across 32 U.S. states from 2010 to 2023 and found an overall mislabeling rate of 39.1%. More than 9 out of 10 fish consumed in the United States is imported. Less than 1% of it is specifically tested for fraud. This product says vanilla on the label. 99% of the vanilla products in the world contain no vanilla. The word is doing a lot of work for a petrochemical derivative, vanilla extract. Real vanilla extract requires vanilla beans from the Vanilla planifolia orchid, grown primarily in Madagascar, Indonesia, and Mexico, harvested by hand, cured for several months, then steeped in alcohol to extract vanillin and the 250 plus additional flavor compounds that give genuine vanilla its complexity. A single vanilla pod costs between $2 and $3. The labor is intensive and the supply is finite. What fills the other 99% of the global vanilla market is synthetic vanillin, a single molecule produced in a laboratory, typically derived from lignin, a byproduct of the paper industry, or from petrochemicals. In 2022, France's General Directorate for Competition Policy, Consumer Affairs, and Fraud Control investigated the vanilla sector and found that 1 in 4 inspected establishments did not comply with labeling regulations. A 23% non-compliance rate was confirmed on collected samples. Investigators found white powder sold as vanilla that was mostly sugar-flavored with synthetic vanillin, vanilla concentrate that was vanilla-flavored water, biotechnology-produced vanillin, which cannot legally be called natural, repeatedly mislabeled as natural vanillin. 1-ounce bottles of genuine vanilla extract retail for around $6. Imitation versions retail for 10 to 30 cents. The gap between those two prices is the entire business model of the fake vanilla industry. What you are baking with is probably petroleum. This product has been the subject of a class action lawsuit in the United States. A DNA analysis confirmed the product contains no truffles, truffle oil. Fresh white truffles from Alba, Italy sell for upward of $3,000 per kilogram. They cannot be cultivated, cannot be farmed, grow underground in a specific handful of regions, in Italy and Croatia, and are available only 4 or 5 months per year. There is no mechanism by which a $30 bottle of truffle oil could contain meaningful quantities of them. What it actually contains is 2,4-dithiapentane, a colorless, petroleum-derived synthetic compound that mimics one aromatic component of truffles, purchased for a few euros per liter from chemical suppliers in Italy, Germany, or China, added to generic olive oil or canola oil, and sold to you with a label showing truffle imagery and charging a luxury price. In May 2017, a class action lawsuit was filed against Sabatino North America LLC, the largest truffle product manufacturer in the United States, alleging deceptive labeling that implied the product contained actual truffles. A DNA analysis confirmed Sabatino truffle oil contains no truffle genetic material. The company labeled it as containing truffle. The chemistry said otherwise. The label says natural truffle aroma. The law allows that phrase to describe compounds extracted from any plant or animal, including porcini mushrooms, celery, soy, and broccoli, processed to mimic the aromatic profile of a truffle. Real truffles are never in the bottle. The word natural is doing the legal work that truffle cannot do honestly. This one requires you to look at the ingredient list of the bottle sitting in your kitchen right now. Maple syrup. Genuine maple syrup requires between 40 and 50 gallons of raw sap from sugar maple trees to produce 1 gallon of finished syrup. That is why a 250 milliliter bottle of real maple syrup costs $8 to $12 in supermarkets from Toronto to Helsinki. Grocery store shelves in every country where maple syrup is sold also carry products labeled pancake syrup, breakfast syrup, and maple-flavored syrup, products that contain no maple sap at all. The primary ingredient is high fructose corn syrup or glucose syrup, with added maple flavor, a chemical compound synthesized to approximate the aroma. The mechanism that hides this is font size. The word maple appears large on the label. The word flavored appears small or is omitted. In some markets, the product image shows maple leaves or maple trees on packaging that contains 0 maple content. This is not illegal in most jurisdictions. It It is permitted by labeling regulations that require only that the product not be actively mislabeled as pure maple syrup. Everything short of that, the imagery, the font choices, the color of the bottle, is an instruction in consumer psychology, not food science. This brand describes its product as 100% juice. A juice production facility in the United States and Brazil operates on a fundamentally different process than what that phrase suggests. Orange juice. What not from concentrate orange juice actually describes is this. Juice is extracted from oranges, stripped of oxygen through a process called aseptic storage to allow it to sit in tanks for up to 12 months without spoiling, then mixed with what the industry calls flavor packs, proprietary chemical formulations developed by fragrance companies, added back to the deoxygenated juice to restore the flavor that was eliminated during processing. Those flavor packs are derived from orange byproducts, orange oil, orange essence. They are legally classified as natural. They are also not disclosed on the label. A 100% orange juice label in the United States does not require the manufacturer to list flavor pack addition because the compounds originate from oranges. The result is a product that tastes consistent year-round, something that fresh orange juice, dependent on seasonal variation in the fruit, does not do. That consistency is the evidence of the process. Alyssa Hamilton, a food policy researcher, documented this mechanism in detail in her 2009 book, Squeezed. The product in your refrigerator is legal. It is also not what the label implies. This one ships from thousands of miles away and arrives at the roaster weeks or months later. The bag says fresh roasted. The date says today, ground coffee. The global coffee supply chain operates with a lag of 6 to 8 months between harvest and retail, meaning the beans inside a grocery store bag were picked approximately half a year before you purchased them. That delay is not the fraud. The fraud is what gets added at the processing stage when supply is constrained. Researchers and food analysts have documented the adulterants found in commercially ground coffee across global markets: roasted corn, roasted barley, roasted soybeans, chicory root, wheat, rice husks, brown sugar, starch, dried fig seeds, and in documented cases from South America, ground acai seeds. These additions lower the cost of production, add bulk to the volume, and are typically undetectable to the consumer by sight, smell, or taste after roasting. The problem intensifies during periods of drought and climate disruption in Brazil and Vietnam, the world's two largest coffee producers, when supply constraints create economic pressure to extend volume with whatever roasts cheaply. None of the adulterants are declared on the label. The label says 100% coffee. The grinder processed something else. This product is sold in restaurants and grocery stores across 5 continents at a significant premium. It is not what the label says. Wagyu beef, genuine Wagyu cattle, specifically the Kuroga Washu breed from Japan, carry a genetic predisposition for intramuscular fat distribution that produces the marbling pattern that drives the product's price. In Japan, Wagyu is graded on a scale of 1 through 5, with grade A5 representing the highest marbling score. The price per kilogram for certified A5 Japanese Wagyu at the wholesale level exceeds $400. What grocery stores and restaurants around the world sell under the Wagyu label is often crossbred cattle, typically an F1 crossbreed of one Wagyu parent and one Angus parent, which produces some marbling increase but bears no resemblance to certified Japanese Wagyu in either genetics, grading, or fat composition. In the United States, there is no federal standard that governs what qualifies for the Wagyu label at retail. Any beef producer can label product Wagyu, regardless of the percentage of actual Wagyu genetics in the animal. Australia, the largest exporter of Wagyu outside Japan, has its own grading standard, but it is not legally required on export labels. The result is a word on a grocery store tag that costs the consumer 3 to 4 times the price of conventional beef and corresponds to no verifiable quality standard in most markets. This spice costs more than $4 per gram in certified form. What is sold as saffron in most of the world's grocery stores costs a fraction of that. There is a reason: saffron. Genuine saffron is the dried stigma of the Crocus sativus flower, harvested by hand 1 thread at a time during a 2-week window each year, primarily in Iran, which produces approximately 90% of the world's supply. It takes 70,000 hand-harvested flowers to produce 1 pound of saffron. The price in certified form reflects that. What is sold as saffron in grocery stores from Mexico City to Munich falls into 3 documented categories of fraud: dyed safflower petals or corn silk colored with synthetic dye to mimic saffron's color, ground turmeric or paprika mixed into saffron powder to reduce cost and increase volume, and genuine saffron adulterated with saffron stamens, the male part of the flower that carries none of the active compound safranal and costs the producer nothing to include. The European Anti-Fraud Office lists saffron as one of the highest risk spices for food fraud across EU member states. A 2020 European Parliament report on food fraud identified saffron adulteration as endemic across retail channels in Spain, Italy, Germany, and France simultaneously. Here is what all 11 of these products have in common. The fraud is not being done by criminals and warehouses at the edge of the food system. It is being done by manufacturers, distributors, and processors operating inside the legal tolerance of food labeling regulations that allow the gap between the word and the substance. The global food fraud industry costs an estimated $49 billion annually. That figure comes from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. The consumer funds every dollar of it. The safest grocery store item you can buy is the one without a label.